There are a few gentle lessons that have carried me through these kinds of seasons. Let your grief be honest, and your love be undramatic. It's all right to cry at the kitchen sink. It's all right to feel confused. You don't need to dress your hurt up as wisdom on day one. Let sorrow run clean, and it will not harden into bitterness. Refuse the easy villains. It's tempting to label the one who left as disloyal, or to brand yourself as unworthy. Most stories are more tender and complicated than that. Remember that you and they are God's people before you are each other's people. Bless without strategy. Sometimes, when we bless, we mean, please come back. Real blessing releases. May God give you what you need, even if it isn't me. Stay curious about what God is forming in you without making your growth the reason for the departure. Those who leave are not enemies of your calling. Often, they are simply done with their assignment in your life, or you in theirs. Be willing to be misunderstood for a season. You cannot manage every narrative about you. Try to live so that time becomes your witness and peace becomes your answer. Leave room for return without keeping a chair empty in your soul. If God brings someone back, you will both be new. Don't try to fit the restored person into the old shape. Take tender care of whoever remains. The person who still texts. The 2 or 3 who call you just to hear your voice. Be found faithful where you are, even when you feel reduced. Let God be enough company for the walk between circles. He doesn't fill the space with noise. He fills it with presence. Across Scripture, separation before entrustment is an often unseen thread. The apprentice shepherd anointed for kingship spends years alone with sheep and songs before anyone calls him king. The dreamer spends time in foreign prisons before he interprets dreams in a palace. A persecutor turned apostle goes quiet in a desert before he writes letters we read centuries later. The field, the prison, the desert. These are not detours. They are classrooms where God writes things on your heart that no one can erase. We misread this when we think elevation means applause. Most of the time, elevation, in God's story, is just another word for deeper responsibility, fuller service, wider love. It's not up. It's down into humility, down into patience, down into carrying people in prayer, down into hands that stay open. To be entrusted with more, you must need less from people's approval. God removes not to embarrass you, but to free you from pretending you're ready because you're surrounded. If this is your season, consider how much God trusts you to walk with Him in the quiet. Think about that for a moment. The God who knows your weakness knows your loyalty too. He believes you will stay when there are fewer reasons to. He believes you will still show up to the small assignments. He believes you will bless those who do not understand. He believes you will steward His whisper without turning it into a speech. That trust is a kind of elevation, a holy one, and it is never loud. The aligned community you long for will come, though rarely on your timetable. They will not be auditions of your old hurts. They will be people with the scent of surrender on them. You will recognize them by how free you feel to be honest, by how little you need to explain your obedience, by how they bring you back to God instead of tying you to themselves. These are the people who walk with you because they are walking with Him, and the friendship becomes an overflow of shared worship. And here is a gentle paradox. You will also become this kind of person for someone else. Your presence will be a refuge, your words a quiet mirror, your open hand a blessing that frees rather than binds. You will not be threatened by another's growth, because you have learned in the silent seasons that all growth belongs to God. You will not cling when it is time to release, because you have learned that love can bless and let go. You will be safe to walk with, precisely because you have been pruned. I wonder what this means for your identity. Loss can make us feel smaller, lesser. But what if it is an invitation to become more whole? To move from, I am who they say I am, to I am who I am when I sit quietly with God. To move from, I belong because they include me, to, I belong because God has made Himself my home. That kind of shift is not dramatic. It's slow and stubborn. Like dawn, you wake up one day and realize you haven't checked the empty chair as often. You have started preparing a table for one again, and somehow, you are not lonely there. We often ask for God's guidance in big decisions, and forget that guidance often looks like a narrowing path. He will lead you not only by words, but by absences. Not just by open doors, but by closed ones you cannot pry apart. He will align your outer world with your inner surrender, and that alignment will cost you some company. But what returns will be peace. What returns will be authority, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that has stayed long enough to know the terrain. When I look back on my own rearrangements, I can see how God was kind even in the suddenness. He spared me arguments that would have left scars. He kept me from over-explaining until my soul was exhausted. He protected me from the places where I'm still tempted to perform. He knew the thoughts I would think in the darker hour, and met me there with a verse that felt like a hand on my shoulder. Not a scolding hand, a father's hand, steadying. An ancient poet once wrote that there is a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. We prefer the first, but there is wisdom in the second. Restraint can be a form of love. Saying, "Not now," can be as sacred as saying, "Forever." God will teach you both, and neither is a betrayal of your heart. I sometimes picture it this way. We are trees planted by water. The seasons turn, leaves fall, branches look bare. If you judged the tree in winter, you would think it had failed to be a tree. But deep beneath the quiet, roots are thickening, seeking deeper streams. Come spring, what appears is not a miracle that came from nowhere. It is the fruit of what was happening where no eye could see. Pruning in the fall made room for fruit in the summer. The gardener knew, even when we doubted. So here, perhaps, is the invitation of this strange season. Let your roots go down. Sit in the silence, long enough to hear what you could not hear when the room was crowded. Notice the seeds God is putting into your hands. They are small because that is how love begins. When He entrusts you with more, a person to serve, a word to carry, a task to complete, you will not be distracted by who did not stay. You will be anchored by who did, by the one who has always stayed. And when the new companions appear, you will meet them not as someone desperate for replacement, but as someone prepared to share the work. You will treat them as gifts, not crutches. You will hold them with open hands. If the season ends, you will bless them as they go. Neither your joy nor your purpose will be held hostage by anyone's presence or absence. This is not independence. It is communion, the kind that frees you to love well because you are loved first. If you need words to carry into prayer, here are a few I have used when my own endings felt raw. Lord, I bless what was. I release what no longer is. I open my hands to what might be. Keep my heart soft. Keep my steps faithful. Guard my tongue. Plant me where I can bear the fruit you desire. Even if that requires pruning I do not understand. Help me to trust your hands more than my habit of holding on. You are not behind because you are alone. You are not less because someone left. You might be exactly where God does some of His most enduring work. He often moves in ways that are almost imperceptible, until one day, the shape of your life makes sense, and you can see the carefulness of His kindness. You can look at the faces around you, fewer, perhaps, but truer, and say, "This is the community God aligned, not the crowd I assembled." There is a great peace in that. I won't give you deadlines. I won't tell you to hurry and heal. That is not how this works. Faith grows in the soil of time, and grief, oddly enough, is often the water that softens the ground. Let it work. Let it baptize you into a quieter, steadier love. Let it make you tender again toward the people God will send for the next chapter, and let it make you faithful toward the God who is writing it. You do not need a perfect answer to rest. Rest is not in an answer anyway. It's in a presence that does not leave. Whether you're walking into rooms full of new faces or sitting at a table that's still set for two, the shepherd who leads you has not changed. He is the same in the crowded afternoon and in the midnight hour when you reach for your phone and remember there is no one to text. He is the same when the opportunity opens and when it turns into unseen work far from the applause you once thought would come. If these reflections help you walk your faith more gently, you're welcome to stay and listen to other messages here at Faith in Practice. Before we end, let me speak a quiet blessing over you, not as someone above you, but as someone walking beside you, with their own empty chairs and their own full heart. May you find that God's pruning is a doorway, not a grave. May you discover the kind of companions who make you truer, not busier. May you be saved from bitterness, from smallness, from the urge to explain your obedience to people who are not meant to understand it right now. May peace settle on you like a shawl in the evening, warm and light, reminding you that you are held. And when the moment comes, and it will, when you realize that the room has new faces and the work has a new weight, may you carry it with a quiet courage, not because you are sure of yourself, but because you are sure of Him. May your life become less about who walks with you and more about how faithfully you walk, with the one who has been faithful to you all along. The chair may be empty today. That does not mean your table is bare. A place remains set for the one who prepares it, and in His company, nothing is wasted. Not the laughter that once filled the room, not the tears that now water the ground. All of it becomes a harvest in time. All of it becomes love. There are seasons when the house grows suddenly quiet, not because something is wrong, but because something has shifted. A chair sits empty where laughter used to be. The phone doesn't light up like it did. An invitation that always came doesn't. You keep making enough coffee for two without thinking about it. And then the silence reminds you, that person is not in this room anymore. I've learned to stop calling that moment failure. It isn't always a rupture. Sometimes it's just how God moves us from one season to the next. Carefully, quietly, in a way that preserves what is true and releases what would have weighed us down. We don't like to talk about it, but God sometimes removes people before He entrusts us with something new. Not because those people are bad, not because we were wrong to walk with them, simply because the next stretch of road requires a different stride, a different pace, a different set of eyes beside us. Not everyone is meant to walk into your next season, and that doesn't make them an enemy or you a mistake. It might just mean the Lord loves you both enough to disentangle your paths. I don't say this as someone unmarked by loss. I have outgrown friendships and been outgrown by them. I've watched the weather shift in a room and understood, without anyone saying a word, that my time there was finished. I've had mentors release me and not explain why. I've moved churches after years of belonging, not because of scandal or drama, but because a quiet conviction settled in the stream that nourished me had become a pond, and God was calling me to follow the river again. Sometimes I wept in parking lots after brave conversations. Sometimes I walked away softly, honoring what had been, refusing to make a villain out of anyone. Some departures were mutual, some not. In all of them, my heart learned how to carry both gratitude and grief at the same time. It helps, I think, to say out loud what these losses feel like. When relationships end suddenly or slowly, we often feel disoriented. There's no map for who you are without us. You don't realize how much your sense of self rested on familiar faces until they aren't there to mirror you anymore. When change comes at the same time as new responsibility, the ache intensifies. Promotion rarely arrives with a parade. It comes with fewer voices in the room, and more of your own voice trembling as you decide what faithfulness looks like. There's the grief of birthdays not shared, inside jokes without a second person, the empty space beside you during a small victory. There's the fear of being misunderstood, of your story being told without you. There's the temptation to hold on a bit too tightly, hoping you can return to what was if you explain your heart just one more time. Sometimes we contort ourselves to stay in a chapter that ended 3 pages ago. And sometimes, the most faithful thing we can do is honor the ending and refuse to betray what God is trying to bless. If you're here, if you are quietly carrying a recent goodbye, let me say what I wish someone had said to me sooner. Your loss does not mean you failed. It does not mean God is displeased. It does not mean you were not lovable or loyal. Sometimes separation is not punishment. Sometimes it is protection. God's silence is not absence. His pruning is not rejection. His removal is not cruelty, it is care. That's a hard sentence to trust when the ache is fresh, but I have found it to be true enough times to stake my peace on it. God prunes living things because He sees how far they can grow. It hurts to be cut back, yes. Yet pruning is a gardener's commitment, not a gardener's anger. Jesus once spoke about this in the plain language of vines and branches. He spoke about being the true vine and His Father the gardener, and said that the healthy branches are pruned so they bear more fruit. He didn't say the pruning meant they were bad. He said the pruning meant they were fruitful, and would be even more so. We've heard those words before. Perhaps, but rarely do we apply them to people in our lives. We forget that pruning sometimes looks like subtraction. You may have the capacity now to carry something you couldn't carry before. Or, perhaps, you no longer need a particular support that once kept you steady. When God removes, He is making room. Room for deeper roots. Room for truer voices. Room for you to hear Him without the echo of too many opinions shaping your steps. There's an old story I return to when the path narrows. Two relatives, both blessed, both prosperous, shared land until their flocks became too large. Their herdsmen began to quarrel for pasture. It wasn't moral failure. It was simple fact. There wasn't enough room for both to move forward together without conflict. One said to the other, "Let there be no strife between us, for we are relatives." And they parted ways, so both could grow without competing. It wasn't an excommunication. It was peace. That quiet separation paved the way for promises to unfold, for each to steward what he had been given. I think of Gideon, sent against impossible odds, only to have his army reduced from thousands to a few hundred before the victory. The trimming was not a punishment. It was a deliberate choice to ensure that when deliverance came, no one could boast it was their numbers that carried them. I think of a small moment in another story. When a house was full of mourners and noise, Jesus took only 3 disciples and the child's parents into the room. He didn't shame the crowd. He simply narrowed the circle for what was about to happen. Not everyone is called into every room, and that is not a judgment on either party. It is wisdom. Separation often precedes stewardship. Before you carry a new weight, God may lighten your pack. Before your voice is entrusted with a wider reach, God may reduce the chorus around you so you learn to recognize His tone in the quiet. Before you walk into rooms that require courage you haven't needed before, He may ask you to walk alone for a time, so your convictions grow strong enough to stand without the scaffolding of constant agreement. And this is important. Sometimes you are the one removed for someone else's sake. We don't like that possibility, but love demands it. You might represent an old pattern for someone God is calling forward. You may be tied, in their memory, to a version of themselves they are outgrowing. And the most gracious thing God can do is let distance protect both of you. Removal, then, becomes mercy for 2 people, not judgment upon one. We are deeply relational beings. God made us that way. We grow by attachment. We heal in safe presence, and we learn by watching each other live. But the same gift that blesses us can bind us when the season changes. What once was support becomes weight. What once encouraged now cautions you into smaller obedience. What once was laughter becomes pressure to maintain a persona that fit a younger season. God knows this. He understands how our hearts draw power and comfort from the familiar. And because He loves us, He refuses to let relationships define what only He should define. The time will come when you look back and realize, it wasn't just people leaving. It was God, with careful hands, rearranging the room so you could breathe in a new way. He moved a barrier you couldn't see so you could walk without tripping. He silenced a voice that would have second-guessed the step you needed to take. He closed a door you were too loyal to close, not because it was a bad door, but because it led to a hallway that ended in a wall, and He was trying to get you turned in the direction of an open field. In seasons like this, we're tempted to create stories to make sense of the loss. They must not have been real friends. I must have done something terrible. Maybe I am hard to love. Those narratives comfort for a moment, but they do not heal. Better to say, we were right for each other then. We are not assigned to each other now. What we shared remains good, even if it is complete. A quiet truth settles in with time. Friends are gifts, not guarantees. Even covenant relationships shift in their expression over decades. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away, and the Lord gives again in another form. Not because He is moody, but because He is a living God moving in a living world, nurturing living souls that change and ripen and require different nutrients over the years. Underneath the ache of losing someone lies a deeper concern. Who am I without the familiar mirrors? Will I still be faithful without the people who held me accountable, who affirmed me, who celebrated me? The dark answer the enemy prefers is loneliness. The quiet answer God whispers is presence. He reminds us that we are seen and known before we are accompanied. He teaches us how to be with Him not as one voice among many, but as the voice that gathers our scattered selves. I have come to believe that God removes people before new entrustment because voices shape stewardship. If you are about to pour out in a way that requires honesty, you need companions who are not threatened by your growth and not enamored by it either. You need people who hear God first, who are secure enough to tell you the truth without managing your approval, and humble enough to release you when they are not called to the next stretch. The wrong voices at the table can turn your offering into performance, your discernment into doubt, your courage into caution. The right voices will make space for your obedience and call you back to God when your eyes wander. It is impossible to rush this alignment. You learn it over years, not weeks. Some of the kindest people will not be your people for the next season. Some of the most gifted will not be the ones you can lean on. Ability and alignment are not the same thing. Alignment is about shared surrender, not shared interests. It's about the humility to say, what God is doing in you calls me to bless you from a distance, and the bravery to receive that blessing without weaponizing it into shame. I think about the young years of Jesus, the majority of his life hidden, ordinary, unseen by crowds. There is a consecration in obscurity we don't appreciate until it is all we have. In the field, when no one is watching, you learn the songs that will hold you when the room grows quiet again. You learn to listen, to repent quickly, to speak less, to work with clean motives because no one is measuring you. In that kind of soil, relationships begin to serve calling rather than compete with it. You may find that God works gently. He rarely tears apart what He can unweave. People who once stood at your left and right begin to step back. The text thread goes silent. The person who always had an opinion for you suddenly has none. In those moments, resist the urge to chase relentlessly or to close the door with a slam. Let the door stay ajar. Bless the hallway. If the Lord means to weave you together again in a future season, it will be a fresh weaving, not a forced knot. And while you wait in a sparser room, notice what else appears. Silence has a sound. When you get quiet enough, footsteps you didn't hear before. Soft, certain. God has always been walking with you. You were just a little too surrounded to notice the rhythm of Him. The scriptures start to open not as lectures, but as letters. A psalm, about a table prepared in the presence of enemies, begins to feel like a table prepared in the presence of emptiness. Still prepared, still yours. You start to taste peace in the same place where anxiety once pressed at your chest. Not because the ache is gone, but because it can now rest in someone steady.